Hello, welcome again to my podcast. My name is Ethan Chazen. I am a New York-based organizational development growth coach, and it has been far too long since I've sat with you and shared on various topics, but I'm back and I'm excited to continue the series. Please remember that I make these videos as an opportunity to share immediately actionable best practices that enable you and your organization to unleash your employees' untapped potential, to maximize their performance and thus productivity and your organization's profitability. So I'm so excited to be continuing the series. Let's jump right back in. Today's program is on how do you effectively conduct succession planning in this post-COVID era of uncertainty. So I want to share a mindset, and a leader's lasting value is how they pass the torch to the future generation of leaders in the organization. So not only is leadership about driving your people forward today, but it's about creating a blueprint for success for the future. So let's just start with the very obvious. What goes into a succession plan? Well, a plan at its most elemental and simplistic must include the following 5 things. What are the key positions in your organization and the key areas within your organization that are enabling your company or not-for-profit to succeed today and tomorrow? So your key positions, if you are heavily reliant on social media, it's going to be somebody who's a social media influencer. If your organization excels at operational efficiency, then, well, your chief operations officer and your frontline fulfillment staff are going to be critically important. So at the very start, you identify what are the key areas and what are the key positions that are needed for success today and moving forward. So let me just share my philosophy. In order for you to conduct a successful succession plan, the very first thing you do as you're looking inside your organization is conduct a human capital audit. And that's the kind of things that I do with my clients. We first take a complete view of your internal organizational org charter landscape by functional area, marketing, sales, customer care, operations, and then across or up and down the 3 levels of your organization: senior leadership, middle management, and frontline staff. So we look at every single individual, what are their roles and responsibilities that are needed for success in their current role, and then also to do your due diligence as their employer to understand their career and professional development. And also all of the things that each of your employees possess that are not currently being utilized in their current role. What does that include? Their cultural diversity, upbringing, education, certifications, training, language proficiency, outside hobbies, interests, skills, volunteer work, engagement in the community. So you're literally creating a snapshot human capital audit view of your entire organization before you complete the first step to identify the key areas and positions that are competitive strengths for your organization. Step 2. You're now looking at what are the capabilities that are required at certain positions and in certain functional areas of your organization. So what does that mean again? What do you need as far as your customer call center? What do you need as far as your marketing people? People in your finance department. So we're looking across the organization, we're going across all the operational silos, and then we're looking again at all of those positions in those functional areas from senior leadership, middle management to frontline staff. So that's the second step, or the second item that you need to include. That's the second section of your succession plan. The third is, do you have a formal plan of attack for identifying those individuals currently in your organization who are not only interested, but possess the requisite skills, experience, passion, knowledge to be identified to fill those key areas and positions? And this is important. What we're not saying in step 3 or section 3 is that just regurgitate who are the people who are important in functional areas and at certain levels in their current role. We're looking at a succession plan for step 3 of how we're going to coach, mentor, and sponsor, meaning senior leadership identifies individuals that they're willing to go to bat to nominate as individuals to be considered for promotions, advancement. So this is a way, step 3 of section 3 of identifying a career and professional development plan for your top performers. The 4th section in your succession plan. How are you going to transfer subject matter expertise? If you have one individual who, let's say, knows where all the bones are kept or knows all of the intellectual capital around a certain technology, a certain product or service, they have specific relationships with your core clients, you want to be able to literally do a schema where you're matching the critical knowledge base that are currently in possession by certain staff members to other people. And one way to kind of share the wealth or spread out, disseminate in section 4, the expertise, in addition to coaching, mentoring, sponsorship programs, is job sharing or rotating people around. I mean, for decades, world-class organizations like DuPont, Nucor Steel, and Disney, they would rotate on a regular recurring basis people across multiple function areas, across different geographies, different office locations, so that people had diversity of subject matter knowledge. Those are 2 considerations. How do you job share? How do you get experience across the organization so it's not residing solely in one individual? And also, I get back to it repeatedly, do you have a formal coaching, mentoring, sponsorship program in place? And these are the kinds of things I develop when I do human capital audits and I do my human capital management. So the 5th section is, how do you assess performance at a high level? I've often been asked, how do you identify the value of each of your employees, your employee ROI, return on investment? Well, in order to evaluate effectiveness, we have to completely rethink the relationship we have with our employees. Why do I say that? Because in order for you to assess your people's performance, 99 out of 100 organizations I am called in to redesign their performance management planning processes and evaluation processes, they're just outdated. They don't work. They're not up to date to effectively assess and evaluate people. It's the whole Daniel Pink famous line. In order to give people empowerment and autonomy, you have to first of all, you have to hire the best. And if you're not hiring the best, none of this works anyway. But with the caveat that you're hiring the best people out there, rock stars, to come in and doing everything to, find them, bring them in, retain them, motivate them. This 5th section, evaluate effectiveness, is how do you empower them to have control over what work they choose to do, who they do it with, when they do it, where they do it from, and that's a whole big issue in and of itself with the notion of the future of work after COVID with hybrid or virtual. And the 5th is how they choose to get the work done. So those 5 criteria, Daniel Pink famously said, when you've gotten that correct, you are then in a position to effectively evaluate your talent. And I'll tell you something else as a sidebar. I'm going to say this, and I'd be happy to talk with you about what I mean. The old way of conducting a performance review is a disaster because the way in which you go about your goal setting is fundamentally wrong. What I mean is, who is determining your goals? How are you defining them? Who's assessing them? What's your processes? Because invariably, they're outdated as well. So these are the 5 things that a succession plan has got to have. So why do we need to do this? I'm assuming because you jumped on this video today that you have an existing need somewhere in your organization to formally create a blueprint of success, a path forward to ensure future success. But the need to plan is predicated on a few key things. So according to Forbes, 10 to 17% of corporations go about appointing a new leader every year. That kind of turnover does not create strategic longevity. According to ATD, the Association for Talent Development, only 1/3 of organizations surveyed have a formal succession plan. So this is problematic. I mean, going a few years back to Deloitte's assessment of this, 86% of surveyed leaders consider succession planning urgent, important, but only 14% report doing a good job at it. So critically, there's a need. Now, post-COVID, with all of the challenges that we're facing in terms of accessing talent acquisition, talent management, in terms of supply chain, in terms of relationship cultivation with vendors, partner suppliers, for many reasons, the need to develop your succession plan is omnipresent. And so because it's in front of us, I want to take a moment to explain to you two kinds of succession planning. Actually, there's three, but most immediately is emergency and ongoing. So I think that University of Southern California does a good job of kind of breaking down those three kinds of succession plans. So one is ongoing, the second is emergency, and the third is what we call business continuity. So I'm just going to talk briefly about the distinctions between these. And if you have any questions, I have my contact details at the end, and we can walk through this to figure out what you and your organization are grappling with. So let's just kind of think about the different distinctions of these three kinds of scenario for succession planning and the impact of COVID, post-COVID, on executive succession planning, the crisis identified for the University of Southern California Center of Executive Succession. So purpose. Ongoing is you're creating both immediate, short-term in the current year, and longer-term succession planning strategies, especially for critical positions in your organization. Remember, whatever is a competitive advantage for you, customer care, your sales organization, building relationships with clients, marketing, doing an effective job of distinguishing a unique value proposition, where your finance team, wherever your core competitive advantages are, your ongoing succession planning is consistently creating a carousel or a pipeline of people who are in strategically important roles today, being exceptional, and also a plan for filling those positions. Because what you really should have is you're constantly challenging your top talent to look to the next step and the next step after that. So that's the ongoing. The sense of purpose is to prepare you for short and long term. Emergency is clearly what the name indicates. The purpose of this is what if it's contingency planning. What if your chief marketing officer leaves, your head of sales retires, or needs to go on a sabbatical? Whatever that scenario is, emergency succession planning, the purpose is exactly that. It's in case something problematic happens, you've protected yourself. So business continuity is who are the people right now in your leadership team, maybe people in middle management, even people in frontline roles, client-facing staff. Who are the people right now who can and do serve as your protection? They're the soldiers who man or woman the wall. They are the ones who stay in those roles to create consistency over time. And then, what if you need to replace them, supplement them, hire new staff? So business continuity is ensuring you have the right people. The purpose of it is ensuring you have the right people for today, and also setting yourself up for the future. And these three are pretty straightforward. I won't dive into all of the characteristics between them, but if you're interested, you can reach out to me. We can talk through this, right? I'm happy to send you the PowerPoint that I've developed. So having said that, the why you plan. I've been a business startup growth coach. I've worked with the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses, the Marion Ewing Kaufman Foundation Business Startup Program, and I've worked with thousands of startups and entrepreneurs. And it's always the same reason why we start to have these conversations of succession planning. They already know that this is not going to be their first rodeo. It's not their first business startup venture. They're already looking to exit because they are what we call serial entrepreneurs in personality and demeanor. So they're already looking for a way out. but they don't want to leave the organization that they've dedicated blood, sweat, years, equity to start. So they're looking for an exit strategy. We also know that in the American workforce of 2023, tens of thousands of boomers and matures are leaving the workforce every day. That's a tremendous drain on intellectual capital, subject matter expertise that's going on in all sorts of organizations. So we need to prepare organizations to handle that loss of talent. It also, why we do the succession plan, sets you up to identify the right people in the right roles for your organization right now and in the future. And it also starts to identify people who are primary best candidates for you to identify for going through leadership development. And I do a significant amount of leadership development. And the way that organizations choose who to train on leadership and who not to, sometimes it's problematic. So the succession plans removes hopefully the bias or the subjectivity in identifying leaders and makes it more objective based on a meritocracy of talent. We also start to think of why we need to develop a succession plan is not only the people side, but also on the who we need. What are the seats that we need on the USS Ship Enterprise to navigate into a future course of success? We need the right roles. And so you may identify in your SWOT analysis your opportunities and your threats, those external facing considerations. You may identify positions such as the head of customer care. You may be thinking about building a world-class organizational culture, which is what I help clients with. And so you may say, you know what, we're going to need not just a CHRO, we're going to need a CPO, a chief people officer, or a chief people happiness officer. So we're identifying through the succession plan, not only people to coach, mentor, train, develop, but roles that are needed. It also prevents disruption in leadership. Let me say that again. A succession plan avoids leadership disruption. So some additional benefits or the prerequisites for why we do this. We identify who we need to hire, what are in your human capital audit, the holes in your org chart. And this, in turn, dictates the strategy behind talent acquisition, talent management, talent retention. So when I'm asked to come in and do an audit of an organization's people, one of the first things I say is, I want to see your human capital audit, and 99% of organizations don't have them. And I'll say, well, wait a second, who are you planning to hire? And sometimes I get an answer, well, our current vacancies are, and I'm like, I'm not asking you who you need to fill. That's kind of putting holes in a rupturing dam to prevent the water coming through. Moving forward, because of a succession plan, you have a strategic document in place to identify in the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. What are the roles that you think you're going to need to recruit for? And interestingly enough, what happens if you need to recruit roles for people who possess a certain skill set that may be problematic to recruit for? The other thing is, you probably have heard during the last 3+ years of COVID of this thing called Great Resignation, silent quitting. Our millennials and Gen Zs aren't loyal. First of all, that's all BS. That's all a load of crap. This is not new. This whole notion of Great Resignation, silent quitting, we're just putting fancy post-COVID labels on them. Let's be real. This has been going on for decades. Is your organization worth people dedicating their blood, sweat, and tears? And is it worth them committing to? Is there loyalty, trust, empathy that your organization exhibits to its people? Do you have career trajectory options, career and professional development, formal programs? Because if you don't have that, there's no war on talent at the best places to work. Trust me. People do want to go work at places like Patagonia and Chobani and Kind. They want to work there. Zynga, Zappos. Why? Because those places have amazing cultures that treat their people the right way. How do you figure that out? The succession plan. And also, we all know, in the same way back in the day, those of you who had any experience doing your own, let's say you were in a sales or marketing role or a finance role, and you had to do your annual strategy document that you are submitting into the overall organization business plan. The minute January 1st hits, you say, oh, throw that out the window. No, the benefit of the planning is not the document, because that's going to change organically constantly. The benefit of the planning is in the doing. It prepares you. It creates a nimble kind of clarity of focus that your senior leadership team now has to understand the ongoing succession, the emergency, and the business continuity. You've got your business covered as far as any scenarios that pop up. You're good for today, and you're in a strong strategic position for a competitive success in the future. So please allow me to make a statement. I have incredible bias. I spent 20 years in corporate America and then 13 years now as an organizational growth coach. I'm going to put my kind of experience on the line here and say, in any organization, you've got 3 levers you can pull to drive the organization forward, right? You've got your strategy, you've got your operations, and you have your people. And I'm here to tell you that strategy and operations don't matter if you don't get the people side of the equation correct. So what do I mean? You may or may not have heard of a pretty consistent applied process of identifying where your employees fit in terms of your organization, in terms of capabilities, right? There are 2 criteria that we look at, potential and performance. So if you have somebody with low potential and low performance, they're in the left bottom quadrant. What you want to do is you want to identify in your succession plan how you would handle it. Now, conversely, let's think about somebody who's got tremendously high potential, right? And they're a top performer. That's all the way to the right and at the very top. They're what we call a future leader. Insert the desired text into your succession plan here. How are you going to handle these people? Because if you're not handling them correctly, and remember, these are your top performers. If you're not handling them correctly, you have a strategic plan in place for each of those individuals all across your organization. I don't care whether you're 50 employees or 50,000, you're going to lose them. You're going to lose them. So you need to have this 9-box approach to identify where all your people fall into these 9 buckets of potential and performance. And then you have a written, documented steps, procedures, policies for each of the 9 boxes in what we call this 9-box approach. So now let's talk about HR. I'm not a fan of HR, and I'm going to throw that out in the spirit of full transparency and objectivity. I was laid off quite a bit in my 20 years in corporate America, never for performance. Human is the first word in their job title, and HR typically is staffed by people who really don't have, from my observation or experience, they don't have the kind of strategic clarity of focus or business acumen where they understand how the people fits into the organization's success. So having said that, I know I'm going to get possibly a lot of backlash. We want HR involved. So HR for decades, ever since manufacturing started getting outsourced in the 80s, when we realized our biggest industry, automobile manufacturing, was getting destroyed by Japanese and German competitors. So our solution initially was to lay off millions of people in that sector. So what we want HR to do, to take a seat back in terms of their value add on the people front for the organization, we want the HR senior leadership team to create measurable outcomes for how we'll identify that the succession plan is a success. You need things that can be measured. In training, when I'm asked to develop training and development programs for clients, I'm asked, how are you going to measure the success? Well, we're going to look on how we modify behavior to increase the outputs, right? The actual things that are produced by your employees who go through the training. You know, as a result of training, they started at X, they're now at Y. There was an increase because of the training attributed to 15%. Same thing applies here. With a succession plan, you want your HR team or you want your HR function to take a look at how are you going to measure success in succession plan. And it may be as simple as you cut down by 50% in 2023 the attrition or the organic loss in people, or maybe you say we want a 75% reduction in loss in customer call center representatives, or maybe we want to reduce the amount of training, or maybe we want to reduce the recruiting of external hires for middle management because we have a a career professional development plan in place where we're promoting from within. That's step one. Step two, this gets back to what I said are the 5 sections at a minimum that are needed in a succession plan. You need those key positions and roles. Step 3, do you have a talent acquisition program that is constantly being reassessed and reevaluated? And one of the first things I do when people and clients ask me, can you come in and fix our recruiting process? I say, well, hold on, recruiting is one piece of that. You have talent acquisition, of which recruiting plays a part. You have talent acquisition, you have talent management. And then all of that encompasses the organic HR flow process. So the talent pipeline is where you're currently recruiting, are you constantly interviewing? Let me give you an example. If your organization is still recruiting based on job postings for job vacancies, you're dead. Your organization's dead and you just don't know it. What I mean by that is the world-class organizations are always in hire mode. In other words, they're always on the lookout for amazing people who exhibit superhero characteristics, and then they bring them in and find a place for them. That's the measure of a forward-looking transformational leadership culture organization. Step 4 in the to-do list: assess, design, develop, implement, and evaluate what are the career experiences and professional development that you want those people in that 9 box. Consider them, high in performance, high in potential, or high in performance, mid-tier in potential. You want those future leaders, rising stars. You want to first, if you don't do anything else today, in the next 30 days, you're going to create an action plan to address in your succession plan those people on the high performance, mid to high potential area of your 9-box strategy. Step 5, develop career growth opportunities for everyone. Not everybody wants to be promoted. Understand that right now. Not everybody wants to be promoted. Not everybody wants to be moving up, although there are quite a few who do. Some people just want to stay in their role and become subject matter experts. They want to stay in their lane. Those people are fundamentally different. So here's a rhetorical question. How do you complete step 5 in your to-do list? Career growth opportunities for everybody, because everybody's different. Yes, which is why what you're going to do is start to have conversations with every employee. You're going to hire rock stars who want and have exhibited by asking them behavioral questions in the interview process. You're going to discover the people who have taken control and ownership of their careers throughout their professional growth. And you're going to, for every individual you hire who's self-motivated, intrinsically motivated, you're going to create action plans based on when they tell you what they want, need, desire. So I've said a number of times today, coach, mentor, sponsor. So let me explain the distinction, because sometimes people don't necessarily understand what all 3 are about. So straight up, the distinction between the 3. Coaching is something where you, as a coach, are going to have an immediate, measurable impact in the person's performance as a result of that coaching engagement. What does that look like? You're going to sit, talk to the individual, identify their career plan. You're going to say, okay, in order for you to get to here from where you are right now, you're going to need this, this, and this. You do step A, I do step B, we work together to do step C. You can just make a list of things that are needed. And we're going to set a time frame, let's say 90 days, in which you are going to be able to achieve the following 4 items as a result of the coaching. And then you work out the details of how often you meet, whether it's daily, weekly, bi-weekly, doesn't matter. At the end of that said time period that was allocated, you will be able to identify through the coaching specific measurable increases in performance in terms of the outputs. How do you identify an output? You sit down in advance and have every employee in your organization have a list of their outputs. Customer care, they have different things that they produce. Sales, same thing. Your employee benefits, or your let's say your finance department, and we're talking whether the individual is an associate, an account executive, a supervisor, or a VP. Doesn't matter, by functional area and by level, each role has specific things that that person produces. So the coaching measures the impact. Mentoring is different. Mentoring is advice and counsel of somebody who's been around the block. They've been there forever. They're a sounding board. They talk more strategically about what that person may do. The individual may go to a mentor to understand whether they want to get a master's degree or sit for their Series 7 or 63 exams or get, I don't know, certifications or additional training. A mentor is somebody who just takes somebody under the wing and gives them advice and counsel, not necessarily specific to having a measurable impact on that person's work, because if they did, that would be coaching. And then the last is sponsorship. What the heck is a sponsorship? In many organizations, most often when I'm doing this kind of program development, it's in professional services, so law firms, accountancies, consulting firms. A sponsorship is, this is what it is. A senior executive has identified a rising star with significant leadership potential and other attributes of a top performer. And the executive formally submits that individual's name, whoever she or he or they are, they submit the name for consideration of that person to be promoted. So now the review committee, the performance review committee, has a name of an individual who's been formally put into for consideration some kind of career advancement track. The executive has the onus of responsibility to explain that candidate's strengths, as well as be the VIP brand ambassador, the champion for that individual. So that's a sponsor. So those are the distinctions. So what does this all entail? There's such a thing as, in the moment, we're thinking about when we identify an individual for coaching, as an example, to have their performance improved. In the moment, succession planning is day in, day out. We don't have to formally sit down and plan it for a future date and time. Think on the kind of training and development that you're currently offering people to do those jobs that you've identified are critical for success today. And you also indicated positions that may be needed in the future. And you're constantly, day in, day out, looking to give meaningful feedback to people to prepare them for success in roles that they're not currently doing. This helps. It helps your long-term planning of your organization to empower every level. So if you were literally to take your organizational chart, and I don't know, for a reference, the old toy, the Etch-a-Sketch, where you would have that little console and you turn the knobs and you draw it in a very thin mechanical looking line and you could shake it and erase it. You're basically creating an org chart that cannot be shaken and erased, because you're empowering every individual in all the functional areas and at all levels to achieve success by maximizing the skills of people in the current role, backfilling if those people, when those people are promoted and they move on to the next role, you have automatically slide somebody in easily because you've already trained and developed. And that's what the succession plan does. And I've talked about these benefits before, so I'm not going to rehash them. So there are three things to consider: policies, procedures, processes. This is my hat tip to the non-people side of the running of an organization. This is the operational considerations of policies. So yeah, are you in legal compliance? Are you prepared to justify the processes, or excuse me, the policies for your hiring and your promotion? And understanding that there's a lot of prerequisites now in terms of anti-discriminatory best practices that you need to be aware of. Procedures. What I find really fun as the human capital geek, the person who loves empowering individuals, is I love to go into an employer's handbook and literally, I don't care if it's 20 pages or hundreds of pages, and start to just tear out or highlight all the areas in which they refer to their employees in a suboptimal way. Your procedures are not in place to control and dominate your employees. Let me say this again. Your procedures should not be in place to control and dominate. That's called management, and management is a dead discipline. It died in the 20th century. In the same way that command control pyramid-shaped organization, a few at the top, very little at the bottom, hoop flows downhill. The strategy is what the top dog says it is. That's dead. In the 21st century, as we flatten organizations into less structured, less tiramisu, and more matrix-driven, less levels of reporting so you can respond quicker to things that happen, your procedures need to change from being a handbook to say what your employees cannot do or must do. Your procedures, your handbook must be a way to empower people to unleash their full potential. And I'm challenging you to go in tomorrow and look at your handbook, because your handbook is written in a way that punishes and tells people what they can do or how they must do it. Your people are closest to their work. They know how to do their work most efficiently. You're just maybe not letting them. And then the processes are, do you have a way, documented way, for every functional department and every level of the organization for people to perform their work at the most optimal level? Is that documented? If not, golden opportunity. This one bullet point, this process revision, go back and look at it with a keener view towards how you empower your people. This is one of the greatest unleveraged assets in your people tool. So the next thing is a SWOT analysis. If you have a marketing background or a business kind of background, a SWOT is a way of holistically looking in and out of your organization. A SWOT is strengths and weaknesses, that's inside the organization, and opportunities and threats. I'm challenging you to go back in and look at strengths and weaknesses of your current staff, skills, experience, ability to lead or not lead, sales acumen, process, people who are in operational roles who have strong process improvement or Six Sigma or Kaizen, kind of manufacturing lean. Strengths, weaknesses are a way to consider for your succession planning, your strength, your strong people and opportunities, your weaknesses of people in current roles. External way of looking at your SWOT analysis is opportunities and threats. So you can see, for example, strengths. We may have a really, really strong financial team. How are you leveraging that? How are you going to advance, promote, reward, recognize, retain the people in your finance department? Because they're the ones they're the glue, they're a strength. Your weaknesses, let's say you have poor supply chain, you have bad quality control metrics, you don't have good inventory tracking. There is an opportunity, there is a direct weakness in terms of a talent drain, a hole in your human capital arsenal. Looking outside in your SWOT analysis from a succession plan perspective is, what are the opportunities that exist? We have this current suite of service that we can leverage by applying it from hospitality to healthcare. All we need to do on the back end is do this kind of design, coding, re-engineering, blah, 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 blah. Well, how are you identifying individuals who are in a position to help you take advantage of those opportunities? Because if you don't have them, you need to get them on board. Those are any opportunity that exists in the marketplace that's either in the next 30, 60, 90 days, you should already be in the process of recruiting to find that talent if they don't exist already. The threats, we know the threats are everywhere. We know they're everywhere. And it's not just if you're a for-profit, not-for-profits, government entities. I've been dealing with creating these SWOT analyses for succession planning in all three kinds of environments. And these are universally applicable considerations. Strength, weakness, to look inside on your people, and opportunities, threats are external. How are you going to take advantage of opportunities by having the right people in place? And how do you have the right people in place to defend against threats? So that's pretty much the construct of a SWOT analysis from the succession plan. I'll just let you kind of take a moment to gloss over this. So I hope today was helpful. I really hope today was helpful. My key consideration is, do you have a succession plan? If you do, you're already fundamentally ahead of other organizations. But when was the last time you revisited? The value, again, is not having the plan. It's going to change constantly. It's got to. Because a succession plan is a strategy document around your people. And your need for people is constant and it's ever evolving. But what did you learn from today? What can you apply immediately from together? So do not pause. If you do not have a plan, you need to have a succession plan. And it doesn't matter that we're sitting here on April 1st, the first day of the second quarter. It doesn't matter that you may not have had one for the first quarter. Just consider today a brand new day to make 2023 a phenomenal opportunity. So having said that, thank everybody for taking time out of your crazy busy days. Just listen a little bit on some maybe idea generation around this thing called succession planning. And for those of you who would like to get in touch with me, let me share my contact details. Send me a message, email me. I'd love to have a conversation with you about your current succession planning, or possibly, if you haven't done it yet, help get you on the road to doing this. So I thank you for your time today, and I look forward to speaking with you. Best of luck in your ongoing organizational development. And most importantly, remember, your people are your greatest strength. Unleash your people's untapped potential, and you'll maximize their performance, their productivity, and thus the profitability. Thank you so much. Have a great day.